How morally responsible should we hold the Kim family for the predicament they find themselves in? And how deserving are they of the lifestyle they have? I find the title, Parasite, to have two possible meanings in this film. The definition of a parasite is an organism that lives in or on an organism of another species and benefits by deriving nutrients at the other's expense. So, my question is, who is the real parasite in the film? At first, it's easy to think of it as the Kim family, as they all methodically implant themselves into the Park's wealthy household. They are all mooching off of them to the point that the Kim's entire income is solely from the Park family, and to them, they're an organism of another species, the rich. But the Kims are able to improve their lives by tricking the Park family and taking advantage of their gullibility. But I think there's a way that you can think of the Parks as being the parasite. This ultra-rich family is almost like a leech to the rest of society. They're soaking up all the wealth around them and splurging it on this lavish lifestyle, while those below are suffering in poverty. They can afford to pay several other people to do basic housework and chores, while most families have to do all that themselves in addition to their full-time work. The Parks absorb resources around them, but what benefit do they provide back to society? I think you could argue that since they spend money to provide these job openings, they are at least providing employment to others, but that's only a minute amount of the money they have. So even though the Kims are deceiving the Parks, can you really blame the Kim family for taking advantage of that opportunity? Who is really more deserving of this rich, luxurious, easy life? The kids of the Park family are born into this environment through no choice of their own. So, of course we can't blame them for being rich. The same blamelessness goes for the Kim children. They were just unlucky with how the cosmic lottery unfolded and were born into a more difficult upbringing. So in a way, neither of them are completely deserving for the lives they have. I think this also can apply to the parents as well. If the two fathers switch positions at birth, how different would their lives end up being? This gets very existentially complicated, because some argue that them switching would make them different people, and they could choose different choices in life and end up unrelated to the other life they would have had, while others believe that them switching bodies would essentially not make a difference, because the only choices they could make would stem from how their surroundings affect them and how they interpret them. So, for instance, if you were to say that if something happened to you, you would behave differently than another person, that might be true if you had your same mind. But if you truly switched places and had the same brain, environment, and experiences as they did, then in this view, you wouldn't behave differently, because you would have had the same life the other person had. And with the same exact upbringing they had, you would behave exactly the same, because how one acts is directly correlated to their past experiences.
The marble rolls because it was pushed. The man eats because he's hungry. An effect is always the result of a prior cause.
So now, this is basically a discussion of free will versus determinism. In society, whether we believe in free will or not, we certainly treat others and punish and condemn them as if they could have and should have done something differently. But I think there's a way to rationalize a lack of free will into actually making us more compassionate. Because if you believe that people couldn't have done differently, things like hatred or vengeance don't seem as justified.
You made no decision to betray me. You could only have done what you did.
But at the same time, those feelings rising in someone wouldn't be entirely their fault either, because those emotions just come into being, whether you want them to or not. They are just an automatic response. If you believe people don't truly have free will though, that doesn't mean that they should go unpunished for poor behavior, because whether they are free or not, the choices they end up making will be affected by external sources. So disciplinary action to rectify that might still be effective in correcting their behavior, or will at least act as a public deterrence and condemnation of unwanted conduct. Coming to terms with realizing how much your choices are out of your control can sometimes be confusing or frightening to people, but I think it's important to notice. For example, you're hearing my voice right now, and the arrangement of sounds are causing thoughts to pop into your head. You wouldn't be thinking what you are right now if you weren't watching this video. Why did you even click on this video? Out of the countless other things you could be doing, this thumbnail or title just happened to stand out to you, and the idea and impulse to watch it just emerged. This is how all choices and decisions in life play out. Take this whole topic I'm laying out to you in this essay. If you are swayed by my opinion and agree with me, this happens through no free will of your own. You found what I have to say as logical, and the reasoning happens to make sense to you. And on the flip side, if you disagree, are confused, or just think I'm an idiot, you don't actually choose to have those responses either. We are all slaves to reason.
Everything is preordained, even my responses.
And you're just going through the motions. The most powerful thing in the universe, still just a puppet.
We're all puppets, Lori. I'm just the puppet who can see the strings.
Now, coming back to the situation that the Kim family is in, the Kims actually do a really good job at what they're hired to do after they weasel their way into the Parks household. So, if the Kims had just happened to be born into that family or with the same opportunities they had, would they have ended up the same? If they didn't swindle themselves into the jobs, then they never would have gotten them. Even if they had the schooling qualifications and didn't have to fake paperwork to appear more professional, they likely wouldn't get hired by the Parks anyways, because as Mrs. Park mentions, she really only likes recommendations from people she already knows and trusts. So that pretty much means only other rich people.
상당히 관심이 가는데 만나뵐 수 있을까 혹시?
진짜?
나 이제 사람을 못 믿잖아. 잘 아는 사람 소개가 아닌다면은 진짜로 못 믿겠어. 근데 그분은 제시카 쌤이 어릴 때부터 쭉 봐온 분이니까 이게 얼마나 마음이 놓이냐고.
Again, the son wouldn't have even been able to get the tutoring position if he wasn't recommended by his friend who was quitting. It's about who you know, not just what service you can provide. So how is anybody ever supposed to break into the upper class if the gap keeps getting bigger and bigger? As I mentioned before about asking what benefit are the Parks providing back to society to justify how much money they make, think about Mrs. Park. She is a nice enough lady, but she doesn't add much value to the family. She's fairly incompetent, doesn't have a job, doesn't clean the house, doesn't teach her children, and takes naps in the middle of the day when a meeting has been scheduled. So, in a way, she could be considered a parasite, mooching off the success of her husband.
그 집 사모님이 뭐랄까. 사모님이 심플해. 영희는 심플.
심플? 그게 뭔 소리야?
So does she really deserve this extravagant lifestyle when she isn't striving to better herself, or likely hasn't had the same kinds of serious struggles others have had? Of course, everybody, no matter how rich or good looking they are, have problems in life, because pain and struggle is inherent to existence. So I'm not trying to be too hard on Mrs. Park, but just asking the question, are some people actually more deserving of a good life than others? The Kim family are all a bit beaten down from life, especially Mr. Kim, but it's not like he never tried. Here, he talks about how he used to be a valet, and also mentions either working at or owning a chicken place and a Taiwan cake shop that both didn't work out. I don't think I need to point out all the countless metaphors about wealth and lifestyle imbalances throughout the film that other essays have, but one of my favorites is how, when it rains, up at the Park house, it's beautiful and refreshing, but then down where the Kims live, it destroys what home they have. This really encapsulates how the Kims' entire environment and view of the world is negatively affected and soiled by their poverty. But if they could just catch a break, things would be better, right?
부자인데 착하다니까. 부자인데 착해가 아니라 부자니까 착한 거지. 뭔 소리인지 알아? 솔직히 이 돈이 다 나한테 있었어 뭐. 나는
Mrs. Kim claims that if she had money, she would be nicer to others. But just as her and her family are becoming financially stable and happy, she finds the former housekeeper's secret and reacts with a lack of empathy or concern for her or her husband's well-being.
이제 불우이웃끼리 이러지 말자 언니야.
난 불이웃 아니야.
어우, 저희는 불우해요. 저희 집도 없고 돈도 없고 빚만 있어요.
Mrs. Kim knows how hard it is being poor, but now that she has herself taken care of, she doesn't want to risk her well-being for others. You can easily imagine their positions being switched and how Mrs. Kim would want to be treated with mercy. And even though the former housekeeper even offers to pay her just to leave food down there for him once a week, Mrs. Kim still refuses. Then, when the whole family falls down the stairs, the housekeeper seizes her chance and blackmails them to keep quiet. These two lower income families are fighting to the death for the scraps of what the wealthy have. Another film that demonstrates this dilemma in an interesting way is The Platform on Netflix. If everybody could only take what they need, those below them wouldn't delve into depravity and starve. This plays out a little differently in the real world because I don't think simply wanting more than others is in essence immoral, but these allegories show the harm that extreme greediness has in reality. I also love this line said by the housekeeper's husband.
카스테라 가게 대만 왕수익 카스테라 가게가 망해갖고 빚을 좀 심하게 졌어요.
He was in almost the exact same happenstance as Mr. Kim. So, in another life, Mr. Kim could be the one living off of crumbs in this bunker like he now is, which by the end of the film, of course, is exactly where he finds himself. This outcome, like many aspects of this film, is alluded to earlier.
그래, 또 이러다가 갑자기 박 사장이 딱 집에 온다 쳐봐. 김기철 이 인간 바퀴벌레처럼 샤샤샤샥 숨겠지? 어? 얘들아, 왜 니네 우리 집 그거 있잖아, 형광등 밤중에 그냥 탁 그냥 바퀴벌레들이
Mr. Kim scurries to the basement like a cockroach trying to survive. So I think depending on how you view this film, you can see both families as the parasite, or at least see parasitical aspects in each of them. But I don't see justification in fully condemning either of them. And this film does a good job at showing that everybody has reasons for why they do what they do. Hey, did you know that on my Patreon, I have exclusive, more taboo videos that won't be shown on this YouTube channel? My latest video is an uncensored, full-length essay discussing the idea of horror films and why those of us that love them are so attracted to them.